All right, we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome to, as I mentioned, the last training in this series, the Power Prism, Grassroots, and Media Advocacy. We'll go to the next slide. So just to start us off, we have a few housekeeping items. So you may have noticed today's session is being recorded, and we will share the recording slides and any tools or resources from all three of these sessions within a couple of weeks. And we do ask that you please keep yourself on mute when not speaking. This is to help us ensure good sound quality throughout the webinar. If you need assistance during the call, please direct message Andrea in the chat. We will have time for Q&A at the end, but if you have any questions, you can enter them directly into the chat or feel free to raise your hand. We'll call on you and you can come off mute to answer your questions. And at the end of the webinar, we ask that you all please take a brief survey that we'll put in the chat. Your feedback helps us make these webinars better in the future, so we thank you in advance for taking the time to fill that out. Slide. So I'm really excited to introduce today's presenters, all of whom are part of our Voices for Healthy Kids team. So in addition to myself, we have Laura Coleman, who is our media relations manager, and she's joining us from her new home in Nashville, Tennessee. And Joshua Harris, who's our senior marketing communications manager, and he's joining us from Baltimore, Maryland. And with that, I'm happy to hand it off to Joshua.
Thank you so much, Ali. Good afternoon, everyone, or it could be morning, depending on where you're at if you're on our West Coast. Excited to have you all here joining us today for this final in the series on the Power Prism training. We're going to do some level setting and just a refresher of some definitions that'll help us to set the framework of what we're going to be working on today. And so when we have conversations about racism, racial equity, health inequity, many terms are used often interchangeably, and being clear about our language and ensuring that you, your team, and other advocates have a good internal grasp on what these concepts mean can make the conversations much more powerful. And so we want to keep in mind that terms mean different things to different people. So when we use a term in a conversation, also describe what we mean. These terms also change over time. And impacted communities may prefer to use different language. So being sure to work with the community coalition to shape your conversations and inform the terms that you use is extremely important. And so you'll see on this next slide here, or it's up there, it is, definition. The definition of health inequities used by Voices for Healthy Kids. Differences in health status of different population groups. These inequities have significant social and economic costs to both individuals and differences in and society. Sorry. I also think it's important for us to note here, it's not a part of the definition that inequities are what cause disparities, as well as the fact that inequities are avoidable, unjust, preventable, and often man-made. So keeping that in mind when we talk about health inequities. The definition of racial justice used by Voices for Healthy Kids. The systemic fair treatment of people of all races, resulting in equitable opportunities and outcomes for all. Racial justice is the absence of discrimination and inequities and the presence of systems and supports to achieve and sustain racial equity. This is the definition of racial equity used by Voices for Healthy Kids. Racial equity would occur when a person is no more or less likely to experience society's benefits or problems because of skin color. Racial inequity is when two or more racial groups are not standing on approximately equal footing. Racial equity is also described as the condition that would be achieved if one's racial identity no longer predicated or predicted how one fares. This includes eliminations of policies, practices, and attitudes and cultural messages that reinforce different outcomes predicted by race. What I ask you to take a moment to pause and think about what are the ways your definition of health inequities, racial equity, and racial justice are the same, or they might be different. But for this conversation purpose, we want to keep these definitions in mind how Voices for Healthy Kids uses them. Next slide, please. It's important for us to acknowledge that a number of policies and public interest advocates have fought for on behalf of historically oppressed and marginalized communities, and often failed or sometimes made things worse. And the important word in that sentence was on behalf of, right? And so when we find ourselves advocating on behalf of a community or constituency without their active participation at all stages of a campaign, we may find that the identified need for change and proposed solution or implementation plan and evaluation measures missed the mark because they did not come from within the community that we were advocating on behalf of, but instead from outside of that community. And so just as an example, lots of times advocates work to secure state appropriations for some important program or intervention, and the state agency responsible for administering the funds may use competitive grant process to determine where those funds go. And the strongest applications come from organizations, cities, and towns with resources to hire skilled grant writers. The money flows to those applicants that had the best application, when in fact the communities most in need of those resources either didn't have the time or people to devote to writing an excellent application, or worse, they didn't even learn about the opportunity, right? Alternatively, had the state agency included residents and aligned organizations from communities most impacted by the issues the funds were intended to address, the application process where the opportunity was promoted and what language and review criteria might have been quite different, right? When we're putting together these packages. Instead, we may have actually increased disparities between communities with plentiful resources and those with fewer resources. And in a perfect world, the advocates and lawmakers framing the budget requests would have done this and already had active inclusion of the people most impacted by the issue, offering specific guidance around the applicant criteria for those funds. And so it's important to make sure that we're inclusive of those communities. And you'll see the quote on the screen. My only fixed truth is a belief in people, a conviction that if people have the opportunity to act freely and the power to control their own destinies, they'll generally reach the right decision. So including those communities in the process is critical. And so with that, hopefully that lays out a successful definition and outline of kind of how we want to frame this work as we begin to talk about grassroots advocacy, communications, and media. And so I'd like to pass it back to Ali.
Thanks, Joshua. So for those of you who've joined us either for both of the last two sessions or just the last one or first one, you might have seen this about the 3 key questions. If this is your first time joining us, I just want to emphasize how important this concept is to the Power Prism and all of the power tools within it. So as we go through grassroots communication and media advocacy today, I just want you to keep the 3 key questions in mind. So if we can go to the next slide. So the 3 questions are, what do you want? Why do you want it? And who has the power to give it to you? And I think, there's a question here as well that's not one of the 3 key ones, but when we are talking about grassroots advocacy, to think about is how do we get whoever has the power to give us what we want, right? And I think grassroots answers that question. We can go to the next slide. So we're just going to dive into first grassroots and key contacts. And before we do that, I want you all to take a quick poll just to gauge where you're at with grassroots and what your comfortability is at with it. Responses are flowing in. This is great. Okay, I think we can Close the poll. So it looks like, we have a mix of folks, those who are pros, some folks who need a refresher, and people who are new to this work. So that's great. I think, we will be able to cover material that's relevant to everyone. So if we can go to the next slide. And again, before we officially dive in, I want to take this moment to just share this quote by Dolores Huerta, who is an American labor leader and civil rights activist. I think it's key to just the concept of grassroots and why it's so important. So every moment is an organizing opportunity, every person a potential activist, every minute a chance to change the world. Next slide. So for those of you who either need a refresher or are new to grassroots work, really want to just cover what grassroots advocacy is. So simply put, it's the process of communicating with the general public and asking them to contact their local, state, or federal officials regarding a particular issue. Grassroots advocacy includes organizing, mobilizing, and engaging the public to advocate for themselves. It's grounded in the belief that people matter, right? And that their collective voices are powerful in influencing decision makers and in shaping policies at all levels of government. And it's really driven by the people. So I like to say, think people power. So why is it important? It lets citizens start powerful conversations around the issues they care about. And by combining and channeling these many voices around a single issue, you have a better chance of getting decision makers to sit up and listen. And so who are grassroots advocates? And it really is just people who have a connected to elected officials, right? We're all grassroots activists. And elected officials are especially keen on appealing to people who live in the districts they represent, because those are the people who literally have the power to hire and fire them come election time. Slide. We also have grass tops advocates, right? So key contacts or grass tops advocates are known as those who have positions, special expertise, or personal relationships that connect them more directly to key decision makers, right? I like to think about the social media term influencers, right? These are people who have outsized influence on decision makers. They could be, celebrities. They could be, members of a faith community, things like that. So these are people who just have some clout with a decision maker. And I think by doing research into decision makers' interests, you can really uncover who potential grass tops advocates are. And it could be that someone you thought is a grassroots advocate is actually a grass tops advocate by nature of their relationship with the decision makers. So by taking the time to understand who your advocates are, by learning about some of the relationships they may have, it could be that someone you thought is just grassroots is actually grass tops and has increased influence over your decision maker, which will better help you get what you want. And I always just say, you might be surprised by the connections that you have. And so if you do some of this pathways of influence research, it might surprise you. Next slide. So a little bit of a pop quiz. What has the biggest influence on a lawmaker? For this one, we'll just do a short exercise. So you'll see that there are 7 factors here. Just put in the chat the factor that you think has the most impact on a lawmaker. I'll just give you a few seconds to do that. And just type in the number. You don't have to type in the whole thing. 4, 5, 3, 7. Cost 3. 6s, 2s, 7, 7, 6, 4, 6, 7. Okay, so wide range of answers. So these are all factors that influence a lawmaker, but the one that has the most impact is number 7. What do my constituents say, right? Because again, constituents are the most important because they decide who gets elected. And your voices as constituents are extremely important in changing and shaping lawmakers' views and ultimately their votes. And when you begin to think like a lawmaker, you can start to realize how big of an impact that we as grassroots advocates can all really play in this process. And I will add that number 3, cost considerations, probably has the second most impact here. But just remember, 7 is the most important. Next slide. So again, grassroots power is people power. And it's this people power that makes grassroots advocacy the quote unquote special sauce of campaigns. Because this is where the personal stories, community wisdom, and the voter power come in. And in the world of policy and advocacy, we often face a lot of obstacles, often have opponents that have deep pockets, right? When we're seeking policy change. But a strong grassroots effort, that engages people, it can turn the tide in your favor, because at the end of the day, it's the voters that make the choice of who to elect, not the lobbyists. And just to give you an idea of how potent that special sauce is, just a handful of phone calls, emails, or text messages can make lawmakers take notice and act. And this is especially true for smaller communities. And a former colleague of mine shared once, and this kind of blew my mind, is that sometimes all it takes is 3 advocates to start getting a lawmaker to monitor an issue, just 3. And in some places, less than 3. And there's a multiplier because so few people take part in the process. So don't think that, if you're not getting hundreds of or thousands of advocates involved on an issue, that it's not making a difference. You really just need to start with 3. And after that, it kind of snowballs. So I think that's very interesting thing to note when it comes to grassroots power. And I think, perhaps the most powerful tool, and this is going to come up later in media advocacy as well, is storytelling. And the real stories of how your campaign issue has impacted someone's life has the power to reach key decision makers and other potential advocates, right? Because facts are important, but underscoring the issue with personal experience, it can have a major impact. When you're doing your campaign and you're on social media and you're posting facts and social math, all these things, it's great, right? But supporters can receive all the facts they want from the campaign, but they need to connect with the issue on a human level to truly be convinced. They want to feel something. And real people who have a personal connection to the issue, they're critically important to convince decision makers, the media, voters, and other potential grassroots advocates that change is needed. And learning about an issue through another's personal story is sometimes more effective than just reading the facts from an email, tweet, or handout. And one thing I like to note is that grassroots advocates don't have to be experts on the issue, right? They just need to be experts on their own experience. Doing the work to include personal stories in your campaign, especially from people who will be directly impacted by your policy change, and from people who are connected to key decision makers, is critical. And another important consideration to make here is that not everyone is going to feel comfortable sharing their story, but if you have the opportunity to build relationships with your advocates and you build trust with them, it's more likely that they're willing to share those stories. And it's those stories that are going to be powerful and influential in convincing other voters as well as lawmakers about the impact of your issue. Slide. So I also want to cover a little bit about building and engaging a grassroots network. We can go to the next one. Joshua touched on this at the beginning as kind of level setting for the day, but I do want to take time to talk about grassroots and health equity. Anytime we're talking about building a grassroots base, it's important that it includes communities that are most impacted by the proposed policy. So if your organization is not led by or representing Black, Latino, Native American, or AAPI communities, do the work to build those meaningful and mutual collaborations with organizations that are. This is not only going to strengthen your campaign, but it's going to ensure that you're giving a platform to people and groups whose voices have been historically underrepresented, ignored, or silenced. And doing this research to learn the priorities of a community and the history of structural racism and health inequities in that community, it's going to help lay the groundwork for inclusive grassroots space building. And key to all of this is just being aware of the effects of your policy solutions, right? Just knowing how it can impact those that have been historically underrepresented is important, because you don't want to just assume that your grassroots space is representative of all people in a broad geographic area. You want to make sure that it's really covering everyone. Next slide. So the key to engaging grassroots advocates is asking and understanding why they're invested in your issue and why they're connected to your organization. And I think what they share can become a way to transform them into leaders that you rely on to build relationships with decision makers or convey your message to the media and just share their personal stories in support of your issue. So just again, underscoring that is understanding why they're connected to your organization or your issue. It's going to help you engage them. And there are different ways that we can engage with grassroots advocates. One, of course, is digital engagement, right? So some examples of digital engagement: blogs, newsletter features, whether it's a training opportunity or webinar such as this, sharing op-eds and letters to the editor, posting on social media, but not just posting, but what are you posting? What graphics are you using? Videos, images. On the slide, you'll see some people say GIF, I say GIF. And I have to say that every time I do this presentation, because there'll always be someone who's like, no, it's GIF, but I say it's GIF. Anyway, Just showing that you don't have to just use stock images. The more that you use that can kind of grab people's attention, get them excited, different ways for them to learn about the issue, it's great. And I think even now, what's interesting about digital engagement is that the landscape is always changing. And so now you have the rise of AI, right? So how are you using AI to either generate images, text, blurbs, all of that sort of thing? I think there's so many ways you can go about it. But just important to remember that how are you digitally engaging your folks? Next slide. There's also offline engagement, right? So sometimes grassroots work needs to be some of that deeper, old-fashioned community organizing, outreach, and engagement. You want to make sure that this grassroots work is done more high touch rather than high tech. And what I mean by that is just making sure that you're reaching the most people. Not everyone is in tune with the latest technology, or they're not all on social media. So you want to make sure that you're covering everyone, covering all of your bases. So an important consideration to make is that with offline engagement, sometimes you may be the right person to do some of that community organizing, but sometimes you may not be. And it's okay to provide funding, if possible, to other organizations, other groups, other individuals that can lead an activity on behalf of your campaign. So an example I like to give is, let's say that you're trying to engage a faith community or another community-based organization. What you could do is you could have a leader from that community kind of do the inviting and conversation leading, and someone from your campaign could provide the information. So you don't always have to be at the forefront of the campaign. You want to make sure that your message is being spread out wide, and also that it's actually being heard and understood. And it's more likely to be heard if it's coming from someone with more credibility than you may have in certain groups or within certain spaces. And some examples of work to build an inclusive base: you could host a lunch at a faith community after a service. You can do door-to-door canvassing with one-pagers and other physical materials. And just maybe have folks that speak different languages, just in case that whoever you reach doesn't speak English or English isn't their primary language. Making sure that you have people that are reaching some of these other folks. You could do another example, a lunch and learn, at a large employer that has an employee base that is populated by people that live in a key legislative district. And I think just as with digital engagement, with offline engagement, really allows you to just be creative. And it requires you to be creative in the sense of making sure that you are tailoring your campaign to getting the most reach. Next slide. I also want to touch on education as a form of engagement. The end goal of any advocacy campaign is to have your advocates take action in support of your cause. And people are more likely to take action if they're properly engaged. And they're also more likely to take action if they understand the cause that they're supporting, which is why education is immensely important in transforming your grassroots advocates into campaign leaders. And I'm going to pause here just to give an example of, we at Voices for Healthy Kids, we recently did an acquisition campaign to grow our grassroots base, and we did it around the issue of preemption. And whether you're familiar with preemption or not, really what you need to know, very, very high level view, is that it's a wonky term, right? Preemption, what does it really mean? The general audience may not know. And what we found is that in rolling out some of these digital advertisements to get people to sign on to our list, the ads performed better if we dedicated a spend to educating people on the issue and why it's important to them. Whereas if we just rolled out the ads themselves without any groundwork or laying the ground about what preemption is, people didn't sign up because they just didn't know, they didn't understand the issue. So when you're thinking about education, think of it like watering a plant, right? If you don't provide the proper resources to your advocates, they won't be able to reach their full potential. Next slide. And getting back to this, again, you just want to make sure that you're including community voice and involving them whenever you're doing grassroots work, whether it's engaging or building. It's so important for campaigns to make sure that there's community voice in any policy work that's intended to solve issues within those communities. And this is from the time the idea is being explored all the way through implementation and evaluation. It's very important that we don't overlook this in the campaign planning process, and anytime we have an opportunity to build capacity. And community inclusion, it's it's much more than, just having a local organization take part in a coalition. You want to make sure that, again, throughout the process, whether it's planning, execution, implementation, even evaluation, that you're making sure to include community-based organizations and voices. Again, this is to make sure that, those populations, individuals that have been historically underrepresented, ignored, or silenced, they have an opportunity to share their thoughts and just be involved in the process for once. Next slide. So I do want to talk about the ladder of engagement, and if we can go to the next slide, you'll see that the ladder itself, so there are different models for the ladder of engagement out there, and depending on the model you use, there'll be different steps. But for now, we're going to focus on awareness, engagement, involvement, and promotion. So how do you navigate the ladder? We'll start at the beginning, at the bottom, right? Say a potential supporter becomes aware of your campaign through an event they attend, or maybe something they see online, and they decide to sign up for your mailing list or on your website just to follow you on social media. Your job from there is to engage them, right? You want to welcome them, thank them for their interest in your organization, in your cause. And then at that point, you might share more information about your organization, right? Success stories to kind of establish credibility, or you might share resources to help them engage with your ongoing work. And the end goal of all of that engagement is to develop the supporter from someone who just follows your organization to someone who's actively involved, someone who's invested. And if you're able to successfully engage them, they may even promote your organization or your cause within their personal networks, right? Adding to your list of supporters. So it's really about how you build up a potential advocate into a fully fledged one that adds to your cause. Next slide. And so there are a lot of opportunities for advocates to get involved in the legislative process. You'll see up on the screen, there's a mix of digital opportunities, offline opportunities as well. To be as impactful as possible, you need to be doing as many of these. And I think here it's important to note that advocacy is not a sprint, right? It's a marathon, and it's a lengthy process that takes time and patience. And if you take the time to involve your advocates in the process, whether it's, again, sending an action alert out to them, which is really easy for them to just take a click, or training them on, to be spokespeople for your issue, it's going to go a long way in helping you get what you want. And I want to end this grassroots portion just, emphasizing the importance of spending time on outreach. So once your campaign has recruited advocates, it's important that you keep them engaged with your campaign so that they stay motivated and willing to take action. And this requires regular communication, right? Not just activation emails whenever you need them to take action or write to elected officials. Some campaigns, they'll put a lot of time and effort into recruiting advocates, but then they fail to maintain communication with them. And an advocate is less likely to make a phone call, participate in a day of advocacy, or write a letter to their elected official if they don't hear from you until you want something to them. So that last point there, right? Treat every advocate like a long-term asset, not a short-term convenience. If you're not if you're not going to be effective at this, it's going to hurt you in the long run, because whatever campaign you're working on, it's not going to be your last campaign. How you treat and include everyone involved in your campaign, it's going to impact your future campaigns as well. So all advocates should be treated like valued members of the campaign. And just to end on this, one analogy that I like to think of is thinking of your relationship with advocates as if it's a relationship with a friend. So if you only called your friend whenever you needed help moving furniture, or if you needed a ride to the airport, they probably wouldn't want to keep being your friend, right? So by keeping those open lines of communication, developing relationships with advocates, you're significantly going to increase the likelihood that they're going to take action when you call on them. And with that, I will toss it back to Joshua for comms and messaging.
Thank you so much, Ali. So we're going to talk about communications and message development. Developing your campaign's message is critical to how you move your campaign forward, and using the 3 key questions, of course, from the Power Prism to develop your message, except for working backwards. So what we want to do is start with who has the power to give you what you want. And that helps us to understand our audience. Audience is key when developing our messaging. Then we use the next question, why do we want it? Specifically using the data that will make the case for our intended policy change for our messaging. And then we'll combine them into a simplified central message that combines the understanding of our audience with what the possible solutions and the data that they might be most receptive to. And so what I want to do here, though, is pause for a second to really challenge. If we go back to the last slide before we get here to our message box, pause for a minute to open the floor. And I want to have you guys share with some of the ways that you communicate your messages and your campaign. There's so many what we like to call NCTs or new communication tools. I want to take a moment to quiz you guys, if you will. There's no right or wrong answers, but if you can just use the raise your hand tool and just share with us ways that you and your organization communicate your messages. The hands. Dre, can you help me here? Okay. Is there anyone who wants to share? Or you can drop it in the chat. Okay, Logan.
Action alerts are our biggest. We have thousands of members that we get alerts out to, and you're right. Like if we get a few people that follow up with their legislators about it, it's impactful.
Thank you for that. Leanne.
We have an early childhood campaign with 8 priorities, and we have a kickoff event with a press release. We have regular Zoom meetings, one on each priority that we have the legislative sponsors and a parent speak at. And we have e-newses usually every other week. And then during the height of the session, I send out a personal email to 400 people about, because we get 48-hour notice about hearings. And so there's not a lot of time to get something out and let them know when they can submit something in writing, where they need to show up, which room, like all of those details. And I usually send that over the weekend. So it's a lot of work, but the longer we've done it, the more people have wanted to be part of that. And I've only had one person ask me to stop sending them emails.
Well, that's really good. That's really good if only one person has asked. Those unsubscribes can get intense. So what I heard, and thank you, Leanne and Logan, for sharing, you all use emails, press releases to communicate with the press. I'd imagine your organization uses social media. There's, of course, action alerts, and you have different tools and platforms that you're using to send those items out. The newsletters, there's all sorts of communication tools. And when we get into the media advocacy, you'll hear from Laura to talk about letters to the editor, op-eds. There's so many ways that we can communicate our message, right? And so being aware of what those different mechanisms are to communicate our message is critical. But before we get to communicating our message, we have to determine what our message is. And so that's what we want to talk about now, how we get into really shaping that message development here using what we call a message box. It's critical to develop a message that is clear, concise, and can resonate with a particular audience or multiple audiences. And to help with this is a tool, the message box. And that can be used to take the information that you hold in your head and that folks on your team know about your work and communicate it in a way that resonates with your chosen audience. If you want your work to be relevant to audiences beyond your field of research, from journalists to policymakers to members of your community or others in the public, you need to think differently about how you communicate, who you are, what you do, and why it matters. The concept is invaluable to developing messages in nonprofit and advocacy campaigns. You'll see here, this in the center is our issue and what we want to change. And what problems are that can be solved around the outside, and what the benefits are, other potential solutions sound in that. And what that looks like transformed is really, if you can go to the next slide for me, having a central message that we can come back to and pivot back to. And so everything around that central message are solutions, that potential solutions that can be offered, and we can come back to our central message. And so what you'll see here is a campaign that we developed this message box for, where the central message, this is for a campaign to increase funding for education in the state of Maryland. And the central message was that our kids can't wait for us to pass the blueprint for Maryland's future, because the blueprint will expand career and technical education, hire more educators, increase their pay, provide additional support to struggling learners, and create lasting educational equity and more prosperous future for all of our state. And so that was like built out version of the central message, and everything around that came back to that central message. So whether we talked about equity, whether we talked about supporting educators, whether we talked about accountability for what the state constitution said and providing a quality public education to all of its students, it all came back to that central message of making sure that there was no more time to wait to pass this piece of legislation, because all these critical things were dependent upon it. If you want to go to the next slide for me, Andrea. Core principles of communicating, specifically when we look at data and message development. One, we want to think about where our audience is coming from. We all absorb information through the lens of our values and our cultural identities. And many believe that it is that if they simply share facts and data, the person or people that they're talking to will automatically agree with them. After all, the science is clear. But research and communication has shown us that time and time again, simply sharing science information and data doesn't change minds and attitudes or behaviors. And so we know that it's about more than just the data. And so we have to be able to communicate in a way that resonates with the communities and the identities and values of the individuals that we want to persuade or we're looking to shift towards our policy solutions. Next, starting with what matters most. People want to know why what you're doing matters. What's the difference that it's going to make? What change it's going to create? And so you don't want to bury the lead. Sharing that first and coming back to it again later always helps our audience remember what the bottom line is. Effective communication is less about cramming in all the details that we might want to convey, and more about knowing what someone cares about and how to share why the work matters to them. The next one is to distill it down to just a couple points. Bullet point, bullet point, bullet points, right? Research tells us over and over again that the human brain can only absorb 3 to 5 pieces of information at a time. And it may be tough to fight the urge to share everything that we know, but we would be like a fire hose of information, and people would drown and not be able to drink from that fire hose. And so our goal is to fill out our message box so that we can identify the information that really matters for the audiences that we want to target and share just that. Now, of course, there's always people, and when working with legislators, who want more information after the fact. And that's what we do. We come back after we've done an initial introduction and we've gave them top line introduction to what the impact will be and the solution that's developed. We come back after the fact and we can provide more detailed information, but we don't want to give that all up front. Keep it simple, down to bullet points. And so the final one, of course, is to really keep it simple, avoiding jargon, right? Sometimes we work in fields and we have acronyms and all these terms that we use that because we use them regularly, we assume that other people may know what they mean. And so recognizing when we're doing that and being able to eliminate that jargon. It can be helpful when we're writing a paper, right? Or when we're writing a white paper or releasing a report. But for those outside of your field of study or the work that you're doing, it can just be confusing. So we want to make sure that we're keeping the message simple so that anyone down to a 6th and 7th grade level can understand what it is that we want, what the impact is going to be. And so that's key when developing our message. Next slide, please, Andrea. So when creating our message, and Laura is going to go into this a little bit more later, we want to begin to identify what media outlets we're targeting after we've developed our message. We want to know what legislators we're targeting, what their background and what their values are. And so that's how we will frame the issue. We want to make sure that our issue is framed appropriately, that will make it newsworthy or relevant to the audience, showing how it affects real people, or showcasing the momentum to support the issue, that there's other people, other communities that care about this issue. And to be effective, this must be done with media outlets that are most important to our decision makers. And I'll just use this example before I pass it off to Laura to go into more detail about media advocacy. In Maryland, we have a really small newspaper called Maryland Matters, and really no one reads it except for legislators. So if you have a key issue that you want to get in front of them and want them to pay attention to, that is where you go to. I can say that probably no one else in the state reads it except for legislators. That is where they go to. And that is the paper that they choose to get their information from. So whenever there's a statewide campaign or issue, that is the news outlet there to get op-eds, letters to the editor in, or to get interviews done on a particular matter, because that's where legislators go for their information. So being aware of what that looks like, and maybe if you're trying to get parents on board, it's a larger outlet, and you can use a local media outlet to do to share information about. But being aware of where your target audience gets their information is critical, so that you can get it to the right in front of the right people and the right decision makers. With that, I will pass it off to Laura to talk a little bit more about media advocacy in depth.
Thank you, Joshua. And hello, everybody. Again, I am Laura Coleman, and I'm going to kind of walk you through and take a deep dive into media advocacy. So to kind of get into those messaging a little bit more. So next slide, please. All right. So today, what you will be able to take away is an understanding of media advocacy through the Power Prism, right? And we're just going to build upon what we've already learned about the Power Prism and adding some tactical skills in media advocacy. Right, so next slide. Right, so today we're going to focus on learning more about media advocacy as a campaign tool. Media advocacy is the strategic use of mass media to influence decision makers and support community organizing to advance social or public policy initiatives. Your key decision makers are influenced by all sorts of media, whether they want to admit it or not. Some may say that there is fake news or fake media, but they're definitely influenced by it. So media advocacy is about using the media to get key decision makers to think differently about your particular issue, right? And so sometimes good media advocacy does not even mention the proposed legislation, but frames the problem in such a way that inspires a call to action. Next slide. All right, so again, what is media advocacy? It's not about getting your name or your organization's name into the press. It's about getting your issue into the press in the way that provokes new or different thinking. And it's about getting that issue into the press that is read, watched, and listened to by your target decision makers. So again, that's not just one way of getting your message out there. So the job is to get our point of view across through media coverage that exposes a problem that we're seeking to fix, right? So we're going to spotlight a solution we seek to implement, and then we're going to celebrate all of our advocacy allies, as we're going to talk a little bit more as we go more into depth about media advocacy, while trying to get into all of our advocacy goals or challenges of one of our opposing forces. So media advocacy rarely feels like this really soft, big hug, right? Sometimes when it's done well, it makes people feel a little uncomfortable, but that's okay. It highlights a controversy and should prompt decision makers to think and act differently about an issue that's important to you. So it's not always, a breath of fresh air, but it's very, very important. Next slide, please. All right, so what's the value of media advocacy, you ask? So you want to inform the public about the systemic culprits of health problems and community issues. You're gaining opportunities for community members to share their experience and leadership on issues, and you're creating an urgency around issues to inspire more involvement. And so with that being said, you want to apply pressure to decision makers, right? We all have a job to do. And of course, we consistently talk about more pressure being applied to what we think is important. Apply pressure to those decision makers just as much as some of us at work, where people are applying pressure to us. So next slide. So let's get into some media advocacy planning, right? So good media advocacy is very effective and often it's free. And so some advocates worry that their campaign budget has no room for media advocacy, but good letters to the editors and op-eds and editorials, they require minimal resources and can have a big influence on key decision makers. No matter your budget, it is important to have a media advocacy strategy to move your campaign forward. Even if your campaign is deliberately avoiding media attention, having a defensive media strategy prepared will help you manage effectively if your work is noted by the press. So keep that in mind. I know some people aren't the biggest fans of the media, but hopefully that'll change today. So we talked about earlier about those three key questions. So the third key question was, who has the power to give it to you, right? So first, you want to find out what media your key decision makers pay attention to. You can ask them in meetings or calls with their staff, and you can follow them on social media and see what news outlets or sources they are reposting or retweeting. And so remember that we're going to look back kind of at this slide, do an exercise with that later. Policy campaigns are not straight lines. There are many steps along the way, each of its own key decision makers to influence and persuade. As your bill moves forward or your coalition moves forward, try to anticipate the next step and key decision makers for each step so that you can conduct research to determine the best media channels and outlets to influence them. Yes, we did say research. All right, next slide, please. All right, so look at previous media coverage, right? So you want to get a sense of previous reporting. How has this issue been portrayed before? Who is speaking in support? Who's been supportive? Who's changed their views of this particular bill? Who is opposing? What are ways that this issue might need to be reframed or advanced, and which reporters are reporting on issues like this? Remember, I mentioned about researching. So just kind of looking back at what has been done, what could be done, and sometimes some things don't need to be changed, right? So really researching so you can know what areas you should be looking for. So you want to get a sense of that previous reporting, and you can also use social media as one of your research sources. Search on the hashtags that relate to your issues, such as hashtag school food or hashtag tobacco and other things like that, or hashtag water, or if it's a crisis, hashtag water crisis, right? So you can use social media to do some of that research and see what's coming up for reporting on these issues. So it doesn't have to necessarily be as difficult as what they normally, would make it. Next slide, please. So let's talk about creating a media list. It is also important early on to make sure that there are ready media list that includes newspapers, television, radio, social media outlets. It can be blogs, anything that's relevant to your issue. You can look at statewide and local media outlets that are relevant to key decision makers. Local news outlets that cover the districts served by key lawmakers. You can view target reporters who cover health, children and youth, and state house politics, as well as columnists who also are more likely to cover issues of racial justice or what's important to you. Make sure your media list is diverse as well and inclusive of communities of color and outlets for audiences whom English may not be their primary language, right? Reach out to we talked about radio. You can reach out. There are radio stations where there's just Spanish speaking radio, right? So when you're trying to convey that media list, you want to make sure that you're as inclusive as possible, or what is more dominant in your area. Make sure to include reporter social media handles in the media list as well. We want to talk about those small wins. Everybody loves to be tagged, or they like to be mentioned, and especially when it's something that can make them look good. So if you have found a reporter that is interested in what you're talking about, or what's important to you, make sure you tag them as well. And so coalition partners may also have well-organized communications teams and may be willing to share their media list as part of their give and get, right? But make sure they know you would only use this for purposes of the campaign, not for your own organization. And so these media lists can also help you get a more accurate sense of who the right reporters are to send your press release or press alerts to. I know Joshua mentioned about something in Baltimore, how it may not seem to the naked eye that this is the most important news outlet, but it's very important to the legislatures, right? So really deep dive into that research and to see who should you be reaching out to the most. Next slide. So identify campaign experts, right? So you want to look at your issue expertise and those lived experience and expertise, right? So you're looking at folks you've recruited to be a part of the campaign. There should be both issue experts and lived experience experts that are part of your campaign. If you don't have them now, it is a great time to create those activities that can build that resource. It is important to identify people that have issue expertise, so that could be the science and the research, and people who just have lived expertise, that's that personal experience. Who does this affect, right? Who is this affecting? And who are willing to speak to media on this issue. And sometimes we'll find it very surprising how often people are willing to speak to the media about certain issues, but just maybe they didn't know how, or maybe they hadn't met the right organization to be able to give them that outlet. So for example, if your issue is water safety in schools, the lived experience expert could be a parent of a child with special needs who can speak to the effect of lead on behavioral disorders in children, which may not be a result of school water, but it shows the impact of lead. It could also be a student themselves, right? We've had someone on our team who has used, their daughter wanted to willingly speak about an issue, and it made a huge difference, right? So a student themselves, this person sharing and talking about a behavioral disorder because of lead exposure is something that will stick with media and decision makers much more than a scientific conversation about parts per billion, right? Or giving those big numbers. So you want to try to have somebody on both ends of that expertise. Next slide, please. Okay. So let's plot out legislative and campaign events. So depending on your issue, you may be planning around a legislative calendar. Plotting this 12 to 24 month legislative calendar into your plan early on may help you leverage important ideas or events to elevate your issue. So you should also look at the calendar with your coalition partners and discuss some of the events that each organization might like to engage lawmakers around, and build these into a campaign plan, right? So this could be your coalition's partners' lobby days. Plotting these days in the calendar gives the campaign a chance to work backwards to plan for what might be needed on those days. If not, it is very easy for the campaign to get a call the day before a lobby day from a partner who says, anything you need me to do, right? The answer is going to always be yes. Yes, there is something that you can do, but that could not be enough time to tell someone yes. with some advance notice, it is possible to legislative events and get some decision maker attention, right? So you want to kind of plot out those campaign events into your calendar so you're able to have some type of representation at each one of those events. And this could also be special events, right? For example, if the AHA has a Go Red for Women event in February, we want to think about leveraging this event for our campaign purpose. We would think about connecting the theme to our policy issue and begin to engage lawmakers in December, attending that event and learning more about the campaign issue through that event. So if you're going to plan to do something in something's happening in February, December is a good time to kind of go ahead and look at it and kind of map out to see could you have some representation there. All right, so we're going to go to the next slide. So earlier, we've been consistently talking about research, right? So research your opposition. So oppositions can take many forms. It can be industry interests that oppose policies that impact their bottom line, or it can be key decision makers, peers that might oppose policy that they feel impacts their district in one way or another. It can be tempting for advocates to think that they don't have an opposition because of the goodness of their cause, but most policy issues have at least two sides to the story, and I think we've all experienced that, or we would need to elaborate campaigns and make the changes that we're trying to make, right? So understanding who has historically opposed your issue, and that goes back to researching how has it been reported in the past versus how would you like to see it be reported now? Who's working with your bill sponsor to understand their sense of who the opposition could be? What will help you plan how to counter potential arguments or reframe the issue to neutralize opposition in your media advocacy work? And you should expect to have to do this. Any reporter who covers the story will show opposing viewpoints, right? So that's their job. But you want to be as prepared as possible. And this reframing could be the messages that you're using, but also the messengers to help deliver your message to the media. So think carefully about who your messengers could be and what they'll be based on and what they know about your opposition or those opposing views. Next slide. All right, so let's get into developing stories and cultivating some spokespeople, right? We just talked about determining who could be some of those best people to speak up on your issue. Next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. So how does media activity advance your campaign goal? Keeping this in mind, we'll keep focus on media targets, message and key messengers, right? So what are your goals for this media activity and how do they advance your campaign goals? So just think about that for about 15 seconds. What are your goals for this media activity and how do they advance your campaign goal? Right? So each time you plan a media activity, start by asking yourself, what is my goal for this media activity and how does this advance the campaign goal? And then as you keep that in mind, how will this help you stay focused on your media targets, your message and your messengers? And it's about getting your issue into the press in a way that provokes new or different things read, watched, and listened by your target decision makers. Next slide. So let's look at some components of a compelling message. A compelling message provides a big picture that answers some questions, right? What is the problem? Why should anyone care about this? What is the solution? What is the ask? What can your audience do about it, right? Why is this urgent? And what is the hope coming out of this? And that is actually one of my favorite ones, thinking about the hope. So let me give you an example. So too many kids in the US schools are distracted in the classroom, but it might not be for the reason that you assume. It's not due to texting with friends or because of viral videos on social media. but their bellies could be the reason to blame, right? So 1 in 6 U.S. families, faces food insecurity, and that means millions of kids can't focus on their studies because they're thinking about the last time they ate, or they're worried about the next time they will eat. So we can fix that problem, right? We can fix that by incorporating universal school meals, including on-campus breakfast and lunch for our students. And you have to think about, can I count on, when you're given this message, can I count on you to support our mission so we can set up all kids for success? So that's a different way of framing your message to make sure that children are less distracted in the classroom. So not looking at it as in the, I guess the first way you would think, which would be, oh, they're just on their phones and things like that. But no, maybe they're just hungry. So that's a way of framing a compelling message. Next slide. I'm sorry, Andrea, it should be the framing your message slide. There we go. Okay, thank you. So framing your message, once you know which media outlets you are targeting, think about how you will frame that issue. When we get our issues covered by relevant media in a way that supports our advocacy goals by framing the problem or our proposed solution, our campaigns are more likely to succeed. So we're going to frame our issue in a way that makes it newsworthy or relevant, highlights the health equity at stake, something that shows how your issue affects real people, but in the context of the system that is causing or solving the problem, and framing our message to showcase support or momentum for our issue. It's about getting that issue into the press, again, that is what read, that's watched, that's listened to target decision makers. And media advocacy can do just that when you are looking at different ways to frame your message. All right, next slide. So developing media-worthy stories, right? So successful campaigns not only develop messages, they create media-worthy stories to help reach and convince our decision makers. So campaign managers and those in charge of campaign communications, they will need to strategize on how to make the story out of the campaign and things that happen along the way newsworthy, right? I think Joshua talked about earlier about how we can't share everything, but there are always pieces that are going to be newsworthy. There are a lot of great storytelling tools out there, and one of our favorites is storytelling and the power of making headlines. It lays out 5 must-have elements of a newsworthy story. And as you can see, that's going to be personal, which is explaining how a person's life is affected by the situation, right? Something that's relatable. Is there something in this story that people can connect to by imagining what they would do if this happened to them? What's surprising? What about the situation is different than what people might assume or expect? What's relevant? Is this story connected or related to something currently happening locally or in your state or in the nation? And timely, what makes now the best time to tell this story? Is there any urgency? What is urgent about this story? And campaign managers, when you are sorting through personal stories of people involved in your campaign, look for the stories that surprise you the most. That will be your best media hook. Next slide. All right, so build relevance to your target media. As you think about your message and media outreach, it is important to ask yourself, what makes this news for the media outlets that your decision makers care about, right? Think about an event that has draw because of the location, who is attending or what's happening, right? Or think of new local information that will matter to readers or viewers. And also think about relevance due to a local organization or local citizens' involvement of the story. And you also want to tailor your message to the target media audience. And remember that your ultimate goal is to persuade lawmakers through media coverage of an issue. So think about who your key decision makers are and what they will respond to. The next slide. So we're going to consider our messengers, right? Have you identified at least one personal impact story you can share with the media? Who are the most compelling spokespeople and why? Those with issue expertise, partner in a key decision maker's district, are their coalition partners you should include, right? It is important to consider your messengers at all times when you're conducting media advocacy work. So first and foremost, it is important to have at least one personal impact story that you can share with the media to illustrate the importance of your campaign, right? Without this, your issue will not resonate the same way. Also, make sure you're thinking about your coalition partners. Are there partners you should include in a press release, press event, or other media outreach, because their participation will what? Either increase likelihood of media coverage, or will it improve your ongoing relationship with them? Or it could possibly increase the campaign's credibility with decision makers. So be very, very mindful when you're considering messengers. Next slide. So we're going to highlight some personal stories. What do you want those to hear who hear your story to think about or understand about this issue? How do you want listeners to feel when they hear your story? And lastly, how might your story convince a lawmaker that our goal is important? More than just data, right? Personal stories are often the one thing that can transform a good campaign into a great campaign. One of the most effective ways to advocate for policy or system changes is to share real stories that illustrate the problem we are looking to solve. And just by the show of hands, you can just do it virtually. How many of you have maybe it's something that you worked on specifically, or maybe there was a particular issue that someone else brought to your attention and you heard a personal story and that really touched you on your decision making to either support that or to either not. Okay, I see a lot of hands going up. Okay, that's good. And see, lawmakers will receive all those facts from the campaign, right? We can shove facts every day, but they need to connect with the issue, just as such as some of you have done. They need to connect with the issue on a more human level, right? To be convinced. We all want to feel something. Think of it as a commercial, right? Real people who have personal connection to the issue are critically important to convince decision makers, the media, and voters in general to change an idea. Think about how you feel when you are looking at certain commercials, some who have personal stories to it. I know the tobacco ones have personal stories to it. A lot of them that involve children have personal stories to it, right? And it can definitely influence your lawmakers to maybe be pay more attention to what's important to you. So we're going to go to the next slide as we continue to work on some framing, right? So portrait versus landscape framing. Ensure what you are looking for when you are trying to frame your messages. So personal stories are impactful. We've gone over that, but we have to be careful that we don't make the story a portrait of an individual that is the hero or villain of our story. We need to expand the frame to show the environment around that person that contributed to the success or hindered the progress, right? That's going to be your landscape. We see this all the time. We love to read the weight loss stories, the person who overcame the odds to start a successful business. And when we focus solely on the individual, we run the risk of leading people to think that anyone can have this outcome if they just work hard enough. Instead, we can use the opportunity to tell a bigger story around the systems of environment that are influencing the individuals to be in that position in the first place. So tell the story of a person, but remember that the system around that you're trying to change is the true hero or the villain of the story. So keep it relevant to your issues and how a lawmaker can act to change the system that has created that issue for the person to tell that personal story in the first place. So that's the difference between portrait versus landscape framing when you're creating the messages. Next slide. All right, so youth voices in the media, I wanted to throw this shameless plug in there because while lawmakers like to hear from adult constituents, it is voices of the young people that resonate and can be especially impactful. Sometimes this may be a good fit for your issue, and sometimes it may not, such as early childhood education, where children are too young to be spokespeople. That could also be viewed in a different way. Sometimes you might have a really, really good young child who can speak to your issue, but just wanting to allow you all to really think about some youth advocates where you are currently that could possibly be of great help for your issue. Youth advocates can be trained and mobilized to speak with their peers, the media, and decision makers about the issue. And with some preparation, youth advocates will be well equipped to share their personal stories from lived experience to lawmakers, media outlets, and social media posts. And we all know the youth love social media, right? It is critical to make sure you have some parental permission for speaking with the media and for any photographs shared with the media if you do decide to use some youth advocates. But definitely look for some youth in your area that are just as passionate, and maybe they can't vote, but you have some that can vote, but they're very, very equipped and ready to face some of those challenges with you. So look into some youth around your area. Next slide. So providing training for spokespeople. In our last slide, I mentioned about the youth that with proper training, that it can be very useful to them. Well, it could be very useful to anybody that is going to help you with your campaigns, right? So advocates who are willing to be spokespeople, they may feel more confident speaking to the media with training. Some people are good and ready to go, and some people would like a little training. And this can be done either one-on-one, or you could do group training, or either in-person training, or over Zooms. Generally, any media interview can include some who can speak to their personal experience, and some from the campaign who is an expert in the issue. So advocates should not feel like they have to know everything about the campaign to speak to the media, and that is something that can be misconstrued often. They just need to be experts in their own experience, which they are. So make sure to plan around their schedules and a good location to determine what works for them if they're willing to be spokespeople. You can have webinars, you can have trainings as part of advocacy days, and of course, like I said, you can have one-on-one coaching. So it helps them develop their personal story as well. And maybe they can speak to that in a certain way, but training can make them feel a little more confident. So provide some training for your spokespeople. Next slide. All right, contacting the media. So there are many ways and reasons to reach out to the media, and advocates should use media advocacy as a way to influence key decision makers when we get our issues covered by relevant media in a way that supports our advocacy goals. So by framing the problem or our proposal solution, our campaigns are more likely to succeed, and media matters. So it is important to follow some of the media rules that we know. Let's talk about contacting media. Next slide. So there are many ways to reach out to the media, and advocates should use media advocacy as a way to do that, right? So in addition, it is helpful to plan your outreach to the media in a way that is most likely to get some traction. So research media outlets to see who covers your issue, like we stated earlier, and what have they wrote about it so far, or have they written anything at all? Often outreach is not successful because the content is not what journalists are interested in. So make sure to reach out to the most targeted persons as much as possible. And this may include reporters, columnists who cover health or children or politics or racial justice, and potentially other topics depending on your issue. So that first rule is going to be only reach out when something is newsworthy. We've all heard the saying that Small wins are still a win, correct? But when you're contacting media, because so many people are already contacting media about what they deem is important, you want to reach out when something is newsworthy. Okay, thank you. So here are some examples of some newsworthy campaign events. So a bill is poised for a vote, or it hits a legislative milestone. That's newsworthy. A campaign is holding an advocacy day or awareness event, especially if you have experts attending that are going to speak on this issue, or advocates who have lived experiences who are going to speak on those issues. That's something that could be newsworthy. Or a similar bill passes in other states and cities that lawmakers consider their peers, right? You want to know, well, these are your peers, you know, they have successfully done it, we can successfully do it as well. Media in another region covers your issue favorably. Opposition is being, and also data or report is being released on your issue. That could be newsworthy. And lastly, organizations that pledge support or a celebrity that speaks out on your issue. We all know some celebrities that have spoken out on some things that they've deemed important and they've bagged up. So that's something that's newsworthy to let them know, hey, this person is on board for what we are trying to accomplish here. So really look at some things that could possibly be newsworthy for your campaign events. Next slide. So contacting diverse media outlets, right? We've mentioned earlier how you want to keep things fresh and you want to keep things diverse. So if you're not sure if there are any news outlets in your area that cater specifically to Black, African-American, Latino, Native American, Alaskan Native, Hawaiian Native, Pacific Islander, and Asian American communities, just Google it. It's free, right? So non-English radio, print, and digital resources can be a great way to connect and engage with communities and their lawmakers as well, and actively seek out diverse sources to be interviewed as issue experts, advocates, and for first-person testimonials, right? And when the more diverse you are in these outlets, the more you'll see how your reach will be affected, right? So diverse outlets are inclusive of communities of colors and audiences from whom English may not be their primary language. So get creative and reach out to some diverse media outlets. Next slide. And also thank the media and offer yourself as a resource. So the media list that you've built, that we've talked about you creating, it should have both email, contact information, and social media handles for reporters. Remember, I said make sure you include their social media handles. So sending a thank you to a reporter via an email or direct message them through social media is also very critical. You can thank them for an article that they have written or an issue that they were involved in, or thank them for reporting an issue that's either related to your campaign or about your campaign. This media relationship building work that will pay off down the line. So it's very, very important to thank them and use yourself as a resource. And reporters often need help making sense of the issues they're covering, right? Because they're covering so much. So offer yourself as a resource on issues that they care about, that you have expertise in or lived experience in. The more you have a relationship with your reporters, the more likely they are to read campaign press related or attend your campaign events. So make sure you offer yourself as a resource as well and thank them. Next slide. So the fun part, using social media to amplify your media success, right? We talked about looking at that hope for your campaign. So you can spread the word about your success. That's just as important. And how we've talked about differentiating what's newsworthy as far as what goes out to reporters, but any of your success is newsworthy to your campaign and to your own personal media accounts, right? So say you've worked hard and you've placed an awesome op-ed with the key spokesperson for your cause in the local weekly paper of a big decision maker, or held a successful press event, right? Take that time after you've had that win to post that on social media and say, hey, check it out. and give yourself your own flowers, right? While it is still fresh in your head, post about your success on social media and make sure that it's seen by the people who need to see it. And this could be your champions. It could be your partners. It could be making sure that you're landing in the email of that decision maker, right? So you can make those type of steps and those type of posts to highlight what you've done. Share articles, right? And tag key decision makers in those op-eds as well. So that's just an example of using campaign events to build power for your campaign, which is exactly what we are going to be doing, right? So next slide. So we're going to do a really, really quick exercise. We've talked about determining some of our popular media outlets where we live. And so what I want you to do, I want you to take a few minutes and I want you can either use Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, whatever you have quick access to, and look up 2 to 3 popular news outlets in your city. I just want you to look those up and then check the number of followers and determine who has the most followers, right? And then I will just call out some people from maybe some different regions and just to tell me what they found out. So an example for me, I'm located in Nashville, Tennessee. And so I looked up 3 of the most popular news channels on Twitter, and that's going to be WSMV for Nashville, WKRN News 2, and News Channel 5. And so while they all had over 200,000 followers, the channel with the most followers on Twitter was actually WSMV for Nashville. So when I'm thinking about a campaign and I'm thinking about, okay, who's a really, really good source? They're all good sources, right? But who's a really, really good source that I can probably tag the most and gain a lot more traction? Of course, I'm going to think WSMV for Nashville. So if anybody has looked up some of their most popular news channels or news stations on either of those platforms, I can just get somebody in some of the regions, anybody from the Northeast region or the Midwest region, Southwest region. You can just raise your hand or so and just share what your finding was. Okay, anybody want to share?
Brian entered his in the chat.
Okay, I see you, Brian. New York Times, 17.3 million. And I see, oh yeah, well, yeah, they have it for sure. KTVU 2 in the Bay Area. Okay, I see someone else is in Nashville, so I already have theirs. Okay, perfect. So just wanted to give that really, really quick synopsis of how easy it is to do that research that I was telling you all about. All right, so really quickly, we're going to go over building power with advocacy. I'm sorry. And so at its core, the Power Prism is a framework for recognizing and acting on opportunities to build momentum in advocacy. So when we refer to internal or external campaign events, we mean an internal campaign event is something that you are doing as a part of your campaign work strategy, such as releasing the results of a poll, recruiting coalition partners, or holding advocacy day. And an external campaign event is something that happens, good or bad, outside of your control. So this could be an editorial of your issue, the passage failure or similar legislation in other states, or proposed funding cuts. All right, next slide. So using campaign events to engage media, right? Again, we talked about if a bill is poised for a vote or hits legislative milestone, if campaign advocacy day or awareness event is happening, or other examples from your experiences, right? So the campaign should always be asking, how could this campaign event help us influence key decision makers through the media? And would the media find it newsworthy in their coverage? Okay. So always remember you're creating those hero opportunities. So your campaign can use media to make supportive lawmakers look good, right? Especially during voting time. So a letter to the editor thanking your sponsors, press releases that includes quotes from your sponsors, and social media posting that praise and thanks supportive lawmakers. With a little effort, supporters can become champions. So make sure you create those hero opportunities. And lastly, we want to spend time on relationships. So personal outreach is necessary to cultivate strong media relationships and relationships with advocates willing to speak with the media. So whomever you've used before, make sure you hold on to those relationships that you've created for people who have decided to be spokespeople or messengers, and reach out to any of those reporters that comment on any of your pieces, and make leverage, but be respectful of relationships your partners may have with media as well. And now I am going to turn it back over to Ali Rahimi to talk about some messaging and media resources that we offer. Thank you all.
Thanks, Laura. So we are almost at time. I want to give you all time to do the survey that I mentioned at the beginning, which we will post in the chat. Just want to give some final thoughts just on in terms of what we have to offer following this training. Andrea, if you could go to the next slide. So we do offer technical assistance here at Voices for Healthy Kids. We have a technical assistance portal that you can find on our website. And if you need help with anything related to grassroots, media advocacy, communications, or messaging, or any of these other areas that you see on the screen, you can submit a request through there. We also have different resources available on our site to you, such as toolkits, success stories, things like that. If you want to take a look and just see what might be there to aid in your campaign. And I believe Andrea has posted the survey in the chat. So if you all could just take the time to fill that out. And I know I had mentioned that we would have time for a Q&A at the end. We are up at time, and I know we got one question, if I can just answer that real quickly. It was about speaking to asset-based versus deficit-based language and messaging. And on that, I just want to say that as in communications, we really have we can influence how the issue is framed, and the language that we use can either reinforce biases and prejudices, or they can frame the messages in a different way. And so really just to that deficit-based language, it fails to acknowledge some of the root issues that many communities face: racism, ableism, sexism, homophobia, things like that. And what it does is it can reinforce some of these stigmas and narratives that we have. And so asset-based language, on the other hand, it'll shed light on some of the systemic inequities. It'll show that there's much more at play rather than what we believe is causing certain issues. I encourage you to look up more on that. I wish we could go into more depth and detail on that. But I hope that was a sufficient answer. And again, if you can just take a moment to just fill out that survey, I know we're at time, we would greatly appreciate it. So thank you all for being here. And David, we will be sending the slides from today in a couple of weeks. Thank you all.